ask.
Thank you for these presentations. So I manage a grant based in Quincy and works with 4 other municipalities kind of going down the South Shore. But I was wondering, and we work a lot with data, the resources are quite limited compared to Boston and Cambridge. There are significant differences in terms of resource access once you get out of Boston and Cambridge. So what I'm wondering is if you've actually engaged with other municipalities in Massachusetts, and if so, what does that look like? And are you open to doing that in terms of building the capacity of small municipalities that are really interested in working with data but have very limited resources?
So if I could take that from the state's perspective,
Sure.
Which I think the state has very much a role in that. Like, you know, there's a reason you go outside of 128 and most of the municipalities like think we don't care or whatever, right? You know, so I think the state has a role in that. And part of the Mass Docs thing and what we're thinking about is, you may have know about the Community Compact program. So it's run through the Division of Local Services. It's a big initiative that the Lieutenant Governor pushes. Mass IT partners with it. And it's a way to provide grants for a lot of technology initiatives for communities. And the head of that initiative and my team have been talking about, you know, things like open data and things like, you know, we'll say a broader data infrastructure. What would it look like to offer that to a municipality, right? A lot of the municipalities are asking about it, especially with the changes to the public records law that took effect in January, and a lot of them are freaked out about how to deliver on that and not get in trouble. So it's conversations we're having about what is the state's role in that, and how can we help bridge that gap between a Boston and a Cambridge and a Quincy, or, you know, the places out in the Berkshires that their IT presence is someone shows up once a month to fix the desktop, right? So I think there's a role for the state in that, and I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like.
Other questions? Saul.
There's an assumption in the panel in this group last year that open data was good. That was probably the same assumption that wasn't questioned or was never in play up until the election. And now suddenly there's a data rescue, which is voting for us to use. That data that is highly public that I could use, they simply disappear. This isn't really a new vulnerability, but a new threat has sort of exposed the whole notion that local entities might choose to suddenly disappear something that previously thought was open. How does that inform the way cities and the state approach open data in the future? And how do we make open data resilient to different threats?
I guess I'll take a stab at that one. I think the open data really has to become something that is a bit more understandable by a lot of people, maybe potentially outside of this room. And so it's really speaking in terms and trying to engage with people, maybe in ways that implies more digital literacy than data literacy. Maybe using that sort of terminology would be more useful when we were talking about this, and maybe potentially engaging with people so that they become more knowledgeable about the things that we're talking about in this room could be helpful, so that more people understand the things that are at stake potentially, and understand sort of the underlying issues that people are talking about. I mean, from our own research that we did, there isn't a lot of broad understanding of data, generally speaking. And so I think if we do want to make open data more of a thing, I think it's more incumbent upon us to really have those types of engagements and build out platforms where we can discuss this in a meaningful way. So I think that's sort of what we're undertaking and trying to build out right now. And I think that's something important to do, because data by itself without context, if you release it, is often meaningless. You have to have someone, most hopefully a human, that can provide a bit more information about the data that you have. So that's some of the learnings that we've had and some of the learnings that we're trying to build back into the learning.
So I'm actually about to put Ben on the spot here. Because Saul, you highlighted an interesting tension that I think is coming down the pike for cities and anybody who does open data. On the one hand, open data should never disappear. Access to open data should never disappear because of political situations like you're talking about. On the other hand, open data leads to what's often referred to as the Mosaic Problem for privacy. So you have a bunch of data sets that together, or that each individually are not a threat to people's privacy or security, but taken together as a whole, there are connections that can be drawn that can threaten people's privacy. One way to deal with this is to periodically prune your open data portal so that you are eliminating old data sets that might help foster these connections, and thereby you protect people's privacy from the threat of this Mosaic problem. But obviously there's a tension here between always preserving data and being as transparent as possible, and then also trying to preserve people's privacy. So Ben's the expert on this. You're on the panel, so I'm going to put him on the spot.
I'll actually, I guess a slightly different response then about the privacy, but I think that the threats that you're highlighting are really just based on, it's not just about data, it's about a broader antagonism to government transparency and civic engagement and democracy. And I think that the best way to make open data sustainable and valuable is to recognize that open data is about more than just the data, and actually using open data as a lens to build a culture of transparency and engagement within government as well as outside government, with citizens and of academics and other groups, viewing the government as a partner and demanding that sort of transparency and engagement and collaboration. So to me, the answer is really about making open data into a broader ecosystem of a new type of culture and mindset around government that's not just based on the data.
So I just, I'm sure everyone's aware of this already, but actually, once that data is posted, it's very easy for someone to mirror it. So as long as the organizations are acknowledge that, and of course all the other qualifications about privacy concerns and so on have to be taken into account, and that's where things like some of the nascent approaches to specifying where are you allowed to use how are you allowed to use the data, where you're allowed to do that needs to be included in the discussion. But actually just reproducing the data and making it and storing it and making sure it's not possible to destroy, at least from the past, is logistically extremely easy, especially in the kind of environment that we live in now.
So if I can jump in on that, I'm going to channel my inner Merced because I know she'd bring this up. So student groups around the area have been hosting, I can't remember exactly what they're called, like data rescue events. And so I know IQSS, which is Merced's home, has hosted a couple of these where students have been student groups have led this and have actively identified data sets that they believe to be at threat for the reasons that you bring up, and harvesting them, archiving them, and putting them in the Dataverse and making them permanently available. And I think that speaks to one of the themes we're seeing here, right? The importance of a thriving civic data ecosystem, right? It doesn't all sit on the municipal government. The municipal government is making this information available, and the rest of us in the other sectors have to also play a certain role in the permanence that you speak to, Saul.
So I'll actually say that the private sector or the public, the non-government public sector, harvesting this stuff is good. What we're trying to do, and obviously what Brian's, how we're trying to do with Boston is, work with libraries as the long-standing keepers of information. We are aligning our metadata with WorldCat and also going to link up with the Internet Archive. So our stuff just goes there automatically, so we don't even have to think about it, and they don't have to come and harvest it and worry about did we change something. We'll just push stuff there, right? It's a little different for the state and municipalities because, and this is also why I presented mass docs and not mass data, because data people get freaked out about. But documents, reports, a lot of agencies are doing that already. Some of them, especially on the state, are legislated to do so, right? They have to report to the legislature every year on, spending or on certain initiatives or whatever, right? So they have requirements to do this. We just want to make it super easy for them to do this, and once we have that information, then, now we can use it and start pushing it out to more places, get it more broadly used. And then I think once the public's aware it's there and is actually getting valuable stuff for themselves, they'll be able to advocate better to their legislatures and whomever is empowered to keep those things going.
And so I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up for lunch.
I think having a mindset of creating value every single day is sort of the mindset that I have. And so whatever that means, whatever that particular day could be is sort of what I live upon. So like, for example, I think creating value comes in a multitude of different ways. So if you can provide value by answering a constituent who has a question about a certain particular data set or providing those connections, maybe that's value. Or maybe value is derived by hosting a class for a group of folks that are asking for how they access information the city's publishing. I think it's not my job to say that I create value. I think value is derived by whatever steps that I can take to really generate public value from whatever perspective that means. So that means that if my job goes away, then okay, great. I mean, not great, but what I'm saying is, I think you can't presuppose that something's going to create value unless you actually try and test it out. And I think only by doing so can you say that it actually does create value. Because maybe all the efforts that we're undertaking will not generate the value that we really want to get to, or maybe there's more work that we need to do. Analyze Boston, we've considered that our minimum viable product. So do we think that by enhancing it, we can make it better? Maybe, or maybe the feedback is that we need to do less. But we can only figure it out by testing it. And so I think I like to use that methodology for myself as well.
So I mean, I would answer that question a little bit, hypothetically, but imagine that once every 5 years, someone from industry or academia takes one data set from there and solves a problem that saves $5 million. That will cover the expense of doing, sort of maintaining that at least. Certainly, all the community engagement and everything else that needs to happen may cost more overall. But even if we believe that happens, once every 5 years, it seems like it would be worth it. So then the question is, we should be measuring whether that is happening, and of course that's very difficult. But that's something that certainly should encourage, and I would encourage so that people actually try to measure whether that actually occurs.
Yeah, I mean, I might be biased, but I totally think that open data portals and program managers are worth it. But I would say, the short answer to your question is that the people have spoken. I mean, we have an open data ordinance, and the city manager is behind this, and we have a lot of resident feedback to push that ordinance through. So this is something that folks want and wanted for transparency's sake. There's obviously some like real material value behind it too, like analytics and data sharing. But I would say like the biggest source of value that I noticed from this program in Cambridge at least is that it's beginning to change the culture, make it a more data-driven culture. So when we first started this program, we had to do trainings on like what is data and answer questions like that for people. And we don't need to do that kind of stuff anymore. Everybody understands what data is. The folks that were putting data into like Microsoft Word tables are now using Excel, and the folks who are using Excel are now using like pivot tables in Excel, and the people who are using pivot tables are starting to ask me about like dashboards and R and stuff like that. So it kind of like raises the tide for everybody a little bit, which is what I think the greatest source of value is.
All right, and with that, let's wrap up for lunch. I want to thank the panel one last time for a great discussion. And I've been asked by Sam to let you guys all know that lunch is going to be it's bag lunches, and it'll be down the stairs, so over in that more open area beneath us.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, sorry.
Thanks for joining, guys. We'll be starting up again after lunch.